There we go. We are live
We're
with
live.
Stephen Cohen, doctor of acupuncture. How are you? Are you in New York City, sir?
My practice is I live
Okay.
in South Florida, which,
Oh,
a little bit
that's quite a
warmer than
commute.
where you are.
That's quite a commute.
Delta and I are close friends.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Before we proceed, you're in. So you are in Florida right now.
Right now, I'm in Florida.
Okay.
Chilly for us, warmer for the rest of the country.
Uh, yeah, it's minus 14. It's minus 14 this morning here, but in
That's
Colorado,
just horrible. But Colorado's gorgeous and
it
lovely.
is. It is. I don't mind it. Even minus 14 here is better than like 25 in New York City for me. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So it's not if you know New York City, a friend of mine pointed this out with the recent cold spells around the country. If you haven't had to like walk backwards to avoid the wind just hitting you and punching you in the face, then you don't know what cold is. And so shout
Well,
out to all our Minnesota friends as well.
prior to COVID, I every year that there was a blizzard, inevitably when everything was almost shut down, I would have one patient in the IVF cycle who needed their acupuncture delivered on a certain time based on this German study, and I would bundle up and make my way over and get it done. And it was inevitable. As soon as there was a blizzard forecast, I knew someone was going to be in an IVF cycle.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. Before we proceed, I do need to shout out my sponsors here at drinkelement.com/fitcare. Whoop, turn that bottle there. LM&T, if you need some electrolytes. I don't know how you feel about it. Maybe we'll talk about that
Sure.
and your expertise around it. So, but yes, if anyone wants to get a free sample pack of all 8 flavors, any order on my link here /fitcare, drinkelement.com/fitcare. Go there, you'll get a free sample pack, 8 flavors. I'm drinking some right now. This is raspberry, delicious raspberry. That got a little too Bill Cosby. I can't do his impressions anymore, right? He was canceled, right? Just checking on everyone's getting canceled.
Staying out of that conversation, Dr.
Okay,
Bill.
that's fair. That's fair. That's smart. That's wise. So this is our Healthy for Life series. We just wrapped up. Michael McDonald was our first one. This is our number 2. Stephen Cohen. And Stephen, you're early in the book. And do you go Stephen? Steve? How do you?
Yeah, Stephen. I prefer Stephen.
All right. And then it's always confusing whenever I have Stevens in my life, if it's a PH or a V in the middle, but you're a PH. Here we are.
I am a PH. My parents were in California at the time. They were Brooklynites, and PH stuck.
I'm a Brooklynite as well. Shout out. What part of Brooklyn, real quick?
My mother was from Borough Park. My father was from Flatbush.
Nice.
My sister was born in Flatbush, I guess.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. As was Michael Jordan. He was born on I believe Flatbush, but one of the hospitals in Brooklyn. Anyway, so let's get to your chapter in Healthy for Life. And we have our subtitle here, Foundational Skills for Parents, Teachers, Mentors, and the Kids They Love. And we'll tie all that in. Especially, I have my 2-year-old. I definitely want to hear about your topic. And we'll talk about your topic, decoding your symptoms based on cross-reactivity. Before we do dive into it, I had my classmate from physical therapy school. She has gotten into food clues, kind of ties into your topic there. Also,
Sure.
Decoding the hidden messages behind your food likes and dislikes. Her book is gorgeous. I'm sure it's something you'd want to kind of cross-check. I keep using that cross-reactivity thing, but and you mentioned you have your guitars in the back there.
That was from Michael's reference
Michael.
about the music. There you go. There you go. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So cross-reactivity, and again, what comes up for me, the big thing here, maybe we jump right to the meat and potatoes, and I'll keep making food analogies.
You're good.
Can't help it. I can't help it. We'll jump to the meat and potatoes. And what are you drinking there? Or anything to decode?
So my lovely wife, who's also an author in the book, she wrote a chapter specifically about gluten intolerance. But this is a green tea that was a gift from the mother of an author in the book, and mixed with a little bit of Ripple milk.
Ripple
milk is a pea protein based milk.
Okay, I have some strong thoughts about pea protein.
I'm happy to hear it. Let's go. And let me say this, and maybe this is the right caveat. I don't know of a perfect solution. That's true for everybody. Okay. And there's lots of reasons for that. And maybe that's a topic of another book, why, what's good for one person isn't, great for another person. I think there are some rules of thumb that are true, but for me, pea protein. I know if I had almond protein, there would be some listener that says almonds are horrible for the environment. And if it was a different nut, that's bad for your brain. And if it was a different legume, that's going to cause a mast cell reaction. And if it was dairy, some people are pro and against. And if it's a cow that actually doesn't produce a certain type of protein, then that's it.
A1 and A2 cows, right? A1,
Yeah,
A2
and then if clarified butter and ghee, and where does that come from, and what does that really mean? And so everybody should just do their best that they can on a
that's
day-to-day
it,
basis.
and that's you have it in the title of your chapter, decoding your symptoms based on your cross-reactivity. So
Yeah.
but again, the first thing that comes up for me is that gluten. So is your wife the one? Should we hold up on the gluten conversation specifically for your wife?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of it. I got, well, I guess, taking a step back and, or for myself. So I'm gluten intolerant. I'm not gluten allergic, even though, it depends who you talk to and the definition of these words. I just try to take a step back and say, if I'm having an allergy, right, my eyes are going to water, my nose is going to run, maybe I have, some dermatographia, you score your arm and you see a tic-tac-toe board, things like that. They usually get better with an antihistamine, usually, right? A Benadryl or something. I'm not plugging any brand specifically. And none of those antihistamines, so to speak, would work for me because I had a genetic factor that made me intolerant. And I know there's a very big luminary who just published this big thing about it. And so I'm going to try to be careful how I talk about it, because intolerance, I try to separate from allergy, even though it depends on who you talk to. The words can be interchangeable. They're not really. And there's an allergy is a specific type of immune cell response, and an intolerance are the kind of other ones that have a longer lasting reactivity in your body, and they don't produce the same symptoms. And some people don't even know that they're intolerant for many, many years, right? And so a lot of that comes from the quality of the lining of the intestines, which, I think in the last 10 or 15 years, most people are aware that their gut health is really important. Brain, but these other books, Dr. Perlmutter, have.
I'm drinking my kombucha for my fermentation.
And fermentation is fantastic. Some people are reactive to it, right? I mean, and so what is the microbial content? And people forget that when they eat whatever, an apple, they don't digest the apple, right? They chew it. It's broken down by a bunch of chemicals in the digestive process. Then it's the microbes that have to actually turn it into metabolites. That's along the lining of your intestines, which is actually a tube with fingers that have fingers and have kind of hairs, if it's healthy. And then that makes its way in as a digestive metabolite that kind of then goes to a bunch of different places.
Yeah, the way I always say it is, you are not what you eat, you are what you absorb. Boom.
I might have to use that, Dr.
Take it.
Yes.
The other thing, if I can cut off the flow
please.
there, is, if that's okay, is the way I think about the sensitivity versus allergy, or I always talk about, and please, I think I work in this space somewhat as well, but I'd give you the deferral of whatever power or expertise here. That's why we have you on. But the way I talk about it when I do include this in my work for folks, fitness, rehab, or nutrition consultation, is I say there's like a pyramid. At the very top, there might be 1 to 5% of folks who are absolutely have no impact from gluten. At the very bottom, you have 1 to 5%. I think at this point, at least 5% of folks who are closer to celiac or like a true diagnosed condition. And then somewhere in between, you have 90% of folks somewhere on that scope of reactivity. I know some folks have the one particular person I'm thinking of went through functional medicine testing, found the antibodies for Hashimoto's, an autoimmune condition. So the functional medicine practitioner saying, hey, gluten might be the worst thing to put into your body, because that's going to keep feeding that Hashimoto's, that autoimmune condition. So maybe avoid gluten. So it's definitely a buzzword. But what do you think of that triangle?
Yeah, so I don't know the actual statistic of celiac disease. I think in terms of the epigenetic proportion of the population that has that, I think there's a couple genes. And I think as the genome is understood more, there will probably be more.
And sorry, just for folks, I want to break down epigenetics versus genetics. Something I always think is important for anyone listening. I don't want to gloss over that. So epigenetic, they say genetics is what loads the gun, and epigenetics is what pulls the trigger, so to speak. But epigenetics is being what comes out, what we express as from our genetics. So if your parents had cancer things and you have a risk factor for that, it's the epigenetics that is probably going to make it more whatever you've lived. It's the nature nurture kind of thing. So epigenetics, if you have anything to add to that, by all means.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, how come they've looked at, and I forget the number of identical twins, and one has one disease and one doesn't. One gets Parkinson's, one doesn't. One gets breast cancer, one doesn't. And they're identical twins. How does that happen? Is that because they were in a car accident? They had a moldy dorm room? They had a trauma from something? Like, it's not so cut and dry. And so, but going back to your patient or your friend with Hashimoto's, so there's, let's just say, two main antibodies, okay? And in the antibody world for that, we're talking about an intolerance or an autoimmune disease. It used to be rheumatology, still is. That's another conversation. And in that case, though, those antibodies, right? So we can evidence that perhaps it's attacking the thyroid gland, and you can do an ultrasound. Maybe they have a nodule or a goiter. Maybe they were a little speedy and skinny, and then maybe their metabolism changed and they're sluggish and maybe putting on a little bit of weight, right?
Well, in this case, no effect on the thyroid yet. So again, that's where the interesting is it a diagnosed condition? Is allopathic medicine, traditional medicine, going to diagnose it? And this person in particular went to a bunch of endocrinologists. Was like, hey, I turned 30, things started kind of going downhill, changing all these symptoms. I don't know what's going on. It took a lot of digging in this kind of functional medicine space to get there. And again, no effect on the thyroid, but maybe this cortisol dysregulation and antibodies present in the body might be impacting something.
Right. So cross-reactivity in the context of my chapter is
Yes.
the antibody, whichever one was present for your friend, okay, that antibody also reacts to some other substances. There's a virus that it reacts to, there's some food substances that it reacts to, and there's other body parts that it reacts to. So when we see on some lab report that says antibody to whatever, for that matter, there's a decoder ring that means it could also be to a series of other things. And to make it more complicated, it doesn't have to be the same for everybody in terms of what that list is. So when somebody has nice plug, when somebody has an antibody, perhaps that functional medicine person or whomever the clinician is wants to try to investigate, well, what are the other things, especially in a case where somebody doesn't have any other observable clinical signs. Is that antibody reacting to something else? And if that antibody is reacting to something else, can you verify that? And if you verify that it's something else, then maybe that something else is actually a problem you want to work on. If maybe there's a viral burden, you want to try to get a little healthier. Maybe there's a food intolerance that you want to try to avoid. And so that's what cross-reactivity is. And those are in the intolerance worlds, but it also is true in the allergy world. In fact, just 2 days ago, and I try to live and breathe this, I found, so my son, who has a bit of a ragweed intolerance, or allergy, let's see, I interchanged it. That was the impetus or the spirit of the chapter, when he was having some respiratory distress and we couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And even though we knew that there was a ragweed allergy, he was eating some foods that to the immune system present as if he was eating ragweed. Okay.
And is this molecular mimickry? Is that just to define
right?
it?
Yes. So molecular mimicry is when one substance looks like another substance. It mimics it. Okay. And on the immune level, cross-reactivity is when is the kind of the umbrella, and when you have one substance can be cross-reactive to another. And so there's a product that we use that a lot of people might use, and in this case, let's just say wormwood. Some people use for parasites or to help with certain digestive features or some other adaptogens. Wormwood is in the same reactivity as ragweed. And my wife and I were kind of, stunned that actually when we were called back, when we went through a period of time that he was really struggling, and lo and behold, it was that product. I didn't know that ragweed and wormwood are in the same family for an allergic cross-reactivity. And so obviously, well, in our case, my wife went around and grabbed the 3 bottles that we had of that product. And I think it's sitting on the counter right now, but it's not to be used anymore. And so lots of people go through health challenges and they don't realize that they make all of these changes that they're told to make. And we, I know offline we've talked about testing, we can talk about it or not. They do their best and they're not meaningfully better, or they're 20, the 80-20 rule, right? And so they want to talk to their providers about, hey, I have these reports and I'm making the changes, but I'm not all the way there, or something is still escaping me. And assuming that their nutrition is pretty dialed in, assuming their sleep hygiene, I think is another chapter in the book, is dialed, assuming all the big blocks are dialed in, then it's time to say, is it possible that what I'm either allergic to or intolerant to, or my persistent viral burden that I do or don't want to take a medicine to try to suppress, is it possible that it's cross-reactive with other things, body tissues, right? Which is why one autoimmune disease can lead into another, and there's a rolling feature. Is it possible that foods are cross-reacting? And is it possible that chemicals are cross-reacting? And people miss that a lot of time on how certain dry cleaning chemicals, and people are like, oh, the dry cleaning chemical. Yeah, it's not good, but it also, although my shirt was dry cleaned, it also, for some people, can cross-react into other human tissues. There are labs specifically that are designated to just try to help you tease this out. They're not all created equal, like everything. Some of them are microarray tests. They're a little bit more affordable, and they use a computer algorithm kind of to get you your answer. Some of them are more of a direct testing, where it's your substance, your blood or your immune system testing against dry cleaning chemicals or bananas or whatever. And then they test everything twice to make sure you don't get a false negative. I'm sorry, false positive. And you have to usually use avoidance or some strategy or some medicine or some supplements and some care, so providers of all different types, to overcome those challenges. And then you have to be patient, because the immune system, you get the flu, right? How long do you really feel tired? It's usually a couple weeks. Some people it can last. So you could talk to your clinicians of all different types on how to amplify your immune system.
Yeah. And again, I want to shout out and make sure everyone caught up on, I don't think I did enough of a job introducing this concept that we are launching, Healthy for Life. We have 25 contributors in the space. Number 2 of my series, Healthy for Life series on this podcast here in Bono's Health. Each one, I hope, gets you at least 1% better, as we like to talk about here. So Stephen joining us from chilly Florida. Chilly Florida.
In my short sleeves.
That's right. I mean, I got short sleeves on too. Doesn't.
I think you flexed there a little, Bo. I think you gave a little flex.
I could, if you really want me to flex.
All right.
But Healthy for Life and the foundational skills for parents, teachers, mentors, and the kids they love. And again, something like an allergy, when your kid presents with a nut allergy or something like that, has to be pretty scary. So again, we have 25 chapters in there. And I think Stephen's, we're talking about here how to approach your own care providers and how to get help. So you kind of alluded to this, but I wanted to hone in on this particular topic. When folks are going through that, things to look out for. We talked about, and I think that would be a good point for me. And I've talked about this with my past classmate, Alexis Sams, who had the Food Clues book, particularly about, again, food allergen testing. Where is that? You mentioned some of it, but I still feel like I'd like to know if, again, my kid's presenting with some kind of reactivity. I particularly have always had a reaction to soy. If I have a little too much, things go poorly. If someone put it in like a milkshake or something, or a
Come on, Dr.
shake,
Bo, what does that mean? Things go poorly. Are your eyes red?
So yeah, I was gonna say I get like if I drink like a protein shake, I get like a raspy throat or like fuzzy throat. I feel that as soon as I'm drinking it in soy milk. And again, if I have too much, I mean, we're talking about it's an intolerance to the extent where I guess
So let's talk about that actually for a second.
Sure.
And so step 1 is to understand that there's more out there that people can do to get their 1% healthier, Okay. And two is to then break down, are they having an allergy the way we would normally say, or are they having an intolerance? Now, you're using your larynx or your vocal cords, and I've traveled the world, 40 or some odd countries with some of the best, most notorious singers in the world. So the larynx is something I know quite well. Okay. Now the larynx, the vocal cords, is actually a mucosal tissue. So that's a tricky one, because things that secrete fluids usually have what's called an IgA. And an IgA is not really an allergy. An allergy is usually more IgE. Okay. Now, why does that matter? Because when you talk to your doctor, if they say, okay, we're doing allergy testing, that is one column of, let's say, 4 different types of immune responses. And that might not be enough. Okay. Now, the old days, because I had horrible allergies as a kid, they do the scratch test, or that's great. Some people do it on a blood test, and that's all allergy. But some people have an IgA problem. And when you mentioned gluten before, some people, they usually test it as an IgA. If you've seen those reports, it doesn't mean that that's A, the right one. B, lots of people have low IgA and they don't realize it. So then when they're talking to their clinician or their doctor, they see that their IgA, I just had this, someone tested like 30 things, but their total IgA was low. So how can you ever expect someone who has a really seriously below the lab level of an IgA level to have any positive real reactions on a meaningful report? It's hard. So you have to kind of check your total IgA, your IgG, your IgE, and check. So as I was saying, step one is you have to acknowledge that there's more that can be done. Two is you have to check more than one silo, which brings us to then where do you check? Okay. This is a problem in our society about insurance reimbursement and not reimbursement. And New York State, for example, is more restrictive on the labs that they can use for lots of reasons. Florida, you can kind of walk into any lab tests, I think .com or whatever the name is, and you can order yourself. New York, you can't even, do that. So there are labs. They're not all created equal, as I was mentioning. And you have to know what you're looking for. The boutique labs are pretty good at it. I don't think that there's a lot of dispute about it. The better labs that I like for intolerance testing and cross-reactivity, though, it's never been validated for kids, and they have a smaller population. So when a doctor in a major hospital wants to see a lab that's, although everyone is certified, they have a database of 50,000 people in the last 6 months. Some of these boutique labs are not going to have that data set of that population, but it doesn't mean that their blood and their immune system is not reacting the way it is on an accredited lab, right? So that's the key. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I walk
It's all
through
useful information. I mean, where that leads me to is let's take it to the parenting part, foundational skills. Again, our subtitle here, foundational
Yeah.
skills for parents, teachers, mentors, and the kids they love. And so I have a 2-year-old toddler. We kind of went through the expose them to new foods, kind of get an assessment of are you having any kind of reactivity? What do you think of that concept at this point? Of again, you got to expose them to peanuts. It
Yeah.
seems I just finished actually the coddling of the American mind. They bring up the fact that I think it was in the 90s or early 2000s where there was this outbreak of peanut allergies, and then the schools just said, hey, 0 peanuts. If it says exposure to peanuts on the packages, like it's not allowed in the school. It's now a biohazard basically to protect some of these kids. And now those allergies, I think 25x like the amount of diagnosed conditions. We're seeing all these different things with food and things like that. So I guess the question to you becomes, as far as kids specifically, it sounds like
So
what's
yeah, I was just saying that's there's a lot going on in that question, because there's a lot of trends that I think parents are dealing with that certainly my parents didn't have to deal with. My son, he's going to be 12 soon. And even parents are smarter today than they were 15 years ago, and that they were.
I don't know if I'd say smarter, but we definitely have access to a lot more information. But yeah.
Okay, fair enough. That you're right. I just want to, okay, fair enough.
I'm being a little cheeky.
Yeah, no, you're right. As it came out of my mouth, I could feel like some people cringe and be like, it's okay. So look,
people like the movie Idiocracy. It's a thing. Anyway, go ahead.
So there's the American Academy of Asthma, Allergy, asthma, allergy, and immunology. I think I'm missing an A. Anyway, they've published a what's called the oral allergy syndrome, and they've published a chart. And what they do is they list a series of foods on one column, and then they have the four main seasons and which allergen, respiratory allergen, environmental allergen is most prevalent in that season, whether it's Timothy grass or ragweed or what have you. And then they tell you on that chart, you just look down. So if you know your 2-year-old in August is like, struggling through allergies, and you give them an antihistamine and they're doing better, so you know it's an allergy, you go to that chart on their website, the oral allergy syndrome chart in the American Academy of Asthma, Allergies and Immunology. And
I
you
looked it
just,
up. It's the American Academy of Allergy. You had it right. It's 4
yeah,
A's, but it's American Academy with a
yes.
2 A's.
All right. And so you just, you look at the chart and you're like, oh, wow. And in our case, our son was eating a lot of melon, and melon cross reacts with ragweed and cross reacts with wormwood. And so, there it was. And so, there's, unless you want to have an antihistamine regimen, avoidance sometimes is the best thing, right? Certainly to let the system calm down. Sometimes they grow out of it. Sometimes they become more tolerant. And so, when you're talking about introducing foods, I always would say talk to your pediatrician what the right way is. I remember when, I was already gluten free, dairy free when we had our son. My wife was gluten free, I think, but not yet dairy free, even though she had lactose intolerance earlier in life, and she treated it in an interesting way for another podcast. Our pediatrician had told us about a study in either Finland or somewhere in the Scandinavian countries. There was an accident the way they formulated the toddler's milk, and there was like a crazy amount of gluten in the milk. And what they found was that children who were exposed to this upper level between, I think, 4 months and 7 months of age went on to ultimately become more tolerant later on in life. Okay. There's a question about when, frequent and regular exposure. And if you expose your kids to everything, are they going to be okay? And then what's really driving this intolerance? Now, gluten is tricky because there's a celiac phenomenon and there's a genetic intolerance and it causes other problems. But by and large, hopefully diversity is always going to be the better answer. Now, children's immune systems, to oversimplify it, imagine only have like one Swiss Army knife type of cell until they're somewhere between, let's say, 3 and 5. And maybe a pediatrician will correct me if I'm off by a little bit. But then that cell kind of changes, and all of a sudden you get all these differentiated immune cells. So there can sometimes be multiple phases of this. And how do you create tolerance? And I think Dr. Peter Green, who runs the Columbia Center for Celiac, I think in his book Celiac Disease, actually mentions that each exposure to gluten for somebody who has celiac, those antibodies can last for years and years, and so it's something to be mindful about. So, how to approach your,
I'm pulling that back up to kind of maybe put a pin or bring it back together, because it sounds, I know, we could talk about this for days. I know that there's a lot of research, and again, a lot of it comes back to the individualization, getting the right testing, playing detective, and there's just so many variables involved. I want to bring it back to this to say, if there's some kind of noted intolerance, allergy, however we want to again define those, blurred lines, so to speak. In those situations, it sounds like they should be seeking out somebody like you to help them play detective with experience.
Sure. Look, I'm happy, to receive the phone call and to support people. There's lots of smart, dynamic, functional medicine minded or systems based medicine people or nutritionists, dietitians. It goes back to water seeks its own level, and it's my experience that parents know when something's off from their kid. They may not know exactly what it is, but they usually have a good instinct that something's not right. On the flip side, the conflict usually happens when parents find out the answer and one kid in the house is gluten intolerant and the other one isn't, or the father can't have dairy, but the rest of the how do you manage the household? And does everybody have to avoid it? And when you have little kids, how do you get through the dinner table when one, the mother or the father or the parent, whatever the right word is making, 6 different dinners to get through 4 people's worth of food? That's not a successful solution. So it takes a village. myself or other people are absolutely equipped to help navigate that, and as well as the 24 other authors in this book or in your series. I hope everyone comes on here. And parents shouldn't give up. If they know something's not right, you have to seek this out. In my experience, for parents, parents often know when there's an allergy, like a true allergy, because the symptoms are on the outside usually more. But when parents see that their child's struggling with behavior, or their belly doesn't feel right, or there's an avoidance of food, or there's a failure to thrive, or they're a little too skinny, or they are avoiding entire food groups. And I'm not talking about when the kid doesn't want to eat steamed broccoli, right? I'm just talking about like when a child is like, I don't want to eat at all. I just keep it all away. They're probably irritated inside, and that's when you want to seek help, because the microbes in the belly cause a reaction, the foods cause a reaction, the immune system causes a reaction, and it cascades. And kids will show it cognitively, they'll show it in their coordination, and that's not to worry parents. All kids go, they all go through their stages of development at different times. It's just when something's not right,
Yeah, and I'd encourage folks to get the book. Again, I'll keep plugging. February 4th, it comes out. If you're watching this, it's January 22nd. If you want to get an advanced reader copy, reach out to myself. I'm sure Stephen can hook it up as well if you want to reach out to him and ask him some questions.
Thank you.
All the ways to contact him should be in wherever you guys are watching the show notes, all that good stuff. But yeah, his chapter is going to go a lot more in depth, as well as his wife's chapter specifically around gluten. I did want to ask you, I assume you're familiar with Rob Wolf? Paleo cure? No?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Paleo solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the paleo term, I think, has come and gone a little bit trend wise.
Yeah.
But his, as he liked to say, sleazy car salesman spiel, and I had him on here maybe over a year ago, something like that. But his sleazy car salesman spiel is, hey, wherever you are in your journey, try to eliminate for 30 days. This is your reset. This is the paleo reset, whatever. He kind of used that term. And again, it turned into all these other things. But his thing was eliminate gluten or grains, dairy, and legumes, as those are the three most likely irritants to most people's modern food.
Yeah.
And then after 30 days, there's a way to reintroduce it. He talks about in his first book. His second book was Wired to Eat, basically saying, hey, if you're unhealthy, if you're overweight, that's not your fault. We're not designed for this world we're living in. Diseases of modern living, that kind of thing. So and then he has an autoimmune protocol as well, carb tolerance testing. Go ahead.
Okay, so there you are. So ultimately, people ask, well, what's the healthiest diet, right? And
Yes.
It depends on who's asking. Again, because if somebody has a cardiovascular risk and they have their cholesterol's through the roof, or they have different things. However, as was taught to me, and I think it to be true, the autoimmune paleo diet, I think, is overall for somebody who's working through health challenges. It doesn't mean somebody who wants to lose 20 pounds on or off of Ozempic, right? That's whether or not the keto or the Mediterranean diet, up to 2 years, they end up in the same place, but you lose more weight earlier on the keto, but then you bounce back a little bit. So I think that the autoimmune paleo, and here's my shameless plug, okay? So I got into this ultimately because my father died of a very complicated multiple system atrophy and a neurological disorder. Okay.
And that's him right above.
Oh, this is okay. And it just it's the driver of this. My mother has her own health challenges. My sister, myself. Okay, but dementia is becoming like really a problem. Okay, and the population. I think NYU just released a study last week that by 2050 or 2060, 45 or 50% of men and women in this country will have some form of dementia. And so, not to plug somebody else's book, but, Dr. Dale Bredesen, I think on page 47, has a grayed out box that says if you do nothing else, essentially, to preserve your brain health is to avoid the gluten protein. And gluten cross-reacts with dairy. Legumes is a different issue, and lectins, and it's just an inflammatory food. But the erosion in the intestinal lining, okay, and then the brain lining, and even the vessel lining could be so significant that actually when those tight junctions open and you have other food particles at the same time or substances that the immune system is trying to see it, that's where a lot of this spins from. So do I advocate the whole world should be gluten-free? Sure. Is that practical? No. We still sell cigarettes in this country, right? And so I'm happy to see that alcohol consumption is on the way down because people are realizing, hey, it's not good for my brain. So I would beg people, to talk to any of the authors in the book or in the series to say, hey, why not investigate whether or not they're intolerant to a food or gluten or dairy or something, and then just try to avoid those foods for a bit, 30 days or longer, and you're going to be healthier, right? We can all do this. 1%.
Well,
It's
and I'll just jump in.
yeah.
I think a lot of people try this. Like Whole30 is something you've probably heard of as well. That's something that became very popular. A lot of gyms would run these experiment or challenges, and then you get this community support. You're getting prizes. You're getting all this accountability. So people would go in 30 days. No, and like the Whole30, for anyone not familiar, is much more restrictive. There's not. I don't even ghee. I think is accepted. You mentioned ghee before,
Yeah.
but outside of that, it's very restrictive on what you can't have. I don't remember, agave might not. They go into the granular, like we don't allow that. So I think things are again kind of finding their groove. But I would always joke with the Whole30. It's 30 days on this very strict kind of restrictive concept. I always joke, day 31, people are having pizza to celebrate, pizza and beer to and it's like,
What's the point? Yeah.
What did you learn?
Yeah.
So I think again, guys, in the book, we're talking about Healthy for Life. This is the series on that. There's the story, so you'll read Stephen's story, you'll read my story, and then there's the skill, and I think your skill gets a little bit into that, of again, like how do you take this approach, and how do we put this, again, 25 chapters in the book of building your own health journey, again, and how do you help that with again, your the kids that we love in our lives, and how do we get ourselves better. And a lot of this is, again, going through all this confusion, because again, we're talking about a lot of different things. We're even having to decipher between, like, hey, we know all these concepts, we know all these concepts, let's kind of work our way through that, cut through with a machete through through this jungle, and get back to, like, hey, if someone's contacting me and they're saying, what can I do for this thing that seems to be these new symptoms I've developed, here we go, now we have some tools. So that's the piece there. I don't know if you had anything off of that ramble. I just went on a ramble.
No, I love it. Personalized medicine is such a great thing, but because it's personal, everyone is different. Everyone needs something a little different, and I just would hope that everybody trusts.
On that, I'll echo Dr. Peter Attia of the difference between medicine 2.0 and medicine 3.0, and I'm thinking that you're shaking your head. You look a little like you could be related to Dr.
I know.
But
I'll shine it
medicine
up a little
2.0. There you go. Medicine 2.0, very good at, car accident, we got to bring you to the emergency department and keeping you alive, keeping your vital organs going. Medicine 3.0 is, I think, a little more what we're talking about here, where it's able to get a little more personalized. It's able to get a little more holistic, longevity based, all these kind of terms that, again, sometimes can seem a little woo-woo-y, but I think they all hold a lot of weight. And we're just trying to bring a lot of science and a little bit of clarity to that in this very confusing space.
I love it. Everyone should be encouraged. They can be healthy, right?
Absolutely, 100%. I looked up your NYU study. The other scary statistic there, their first line they start out with is what they found after the age of 55, among Americans, 42% are at a high risk of developing dementia at any time after the age of 55, which is more than double the risk reported by older studies. So it used to be 21%, 20%. We're up to 42%. We're getting to a point where it's 1 out of 2 of us. So there's 2 of us here. I'd like to think we're both doing things that are moving us in the right direction, but still, it's the old thing when you start medical school, if you ever seen that, it's like, look to your left, look to your right, 2 of you won't be here, out of the 3 of you. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a tough, we're getting hard. It's getting harder and harder somehow, despite what you alluded to, or whether we want to say people are smarter, more informed, less informed, have access to more information. This is the first generation alpha, leading up to 2025, the last 12 years, first generation in history that has a shorter life expectancy than the previous generation. That's never happened in human history. So we're talking, we can throw all this. I was just going to say that.
And it's not just COVID, and it's not just fentanyl or drugs. It's a real phenomenon. We all have to do what we can to be a little bit healthier.
100%, my friend. Yeah, I think we wanted to keep it under 30, but that's totally fine. Again, I think we can keep going. We can certainly come back for a part 2. Want to be respectful of your time, the listeners' time. Shout out my sponsor one more time, drinkelement.com/fitcare. Get your free sample. That lighting, there we go. Elementi. get your sample pack at my link. Go there, do it now, live a better life. And I don't. Did you have any thoughts about electrolytes? That's totally fine if you want to.
No, I think it's great. That's a cool company. I'm happy to hear that that the FDA is going to be banning red dye. I mean, that's been a long time coming.
There's no red dye in. There's no
I
red
know
dye
that's
in. I just
right.
want to be clear. Just want to be clear.
Yeah, no, the raspberry. I know. I looked it up too. Yeah, and so red dye is actually a cross reactor in the gluten world. So it just goes to show. So have your electrolytes. Call Dr. Bo. Get your use his link for the free sample. And thank you for doing this. I hope if it helps, 1%, 1%, if they can be healthier, just know that they can talk to their doctor or find a person who can do this and support them. Their family's going to be healthier. Their kids will be healthier. Their life will be easier, right?
That's right. One more time, guys. Healthy for Life, the book. That's right above his head over there. It is. No, you had it right. You had it right. Nope, the other side. The other side. The other side.
Oh, mine. It's the other side.
There
you
it
go.
is. There
Okay.
it is. That's okay. Sometimes I don't know if your camera's backwards. That's okay. Anyway, so go get the book. February 4th is our launch on Amazon. Please help us. Leave a review on my podcast. Go subscribe here, wherever you're watching this. Also get the book. Again, this is part 2 or the second episode of our Healthy for Life series. This weekend coming up, we're going to have another 6 of the authors of the 25, amazing. I think. So looking forward to it, Stephen. I'm hoping we can connect more, enjoy this conversation.
I love it. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr.
And signing off here, guys. Hope you got 1% better today. Stephen, stay